Welcome to the Kentucky A-BRI module on Tier 2 Mathematics. My name is Dee Dee Newbern, and I am the Safe School Specialist and District PBIS Coach for Fayette County Public Schools. In this module, we will share some of the key information identified by the Institute of Education Sciences and What Works Clearinghouse on how to assist students struggling in mathematics using an RTI framework. Tier 2 instruction is targeted instruction that is offered to students who show through data that they are not responding to primary prevention. Typically, Tier 2 students will receive supplemental small group mathematics instruction in addition to Tier 1 instruction that is aimed at building targeted mathematics proficiencies. This tutorial will focus on the recommendations from the IES practice guide titled Assisting Students Struggling with Mathematics, Response to Intervention for Elementary and Middle Schools. Developed by a panel of researchers and practitioners, these recommendations are intended to help teachers, principals, and school administrators use response to intervention to address the needs of students struggling with mathematics. The 8 recommendations include 1. Screen all students to identify those at risk for potential mathematics difficulties and provide interventions to students identified as at risk. 2. Instructional materials for students receiving interventions should focus intensely on in-depth treatment of whole numbers in kindergarten through grade 5 and on rational numbers in grades 4 through 8. 3. Instruction during the intervention should be explicit and systematic. Recommendation 4. Intervention should include instruction on solving word problems that is based on common underlying structures. 5. Intervention materials should include opportunities for students to work with visual representations of mathematical ideas. 6. Interventions at all grade levels should devote about 10 minutes in each session to building fluent retrieval of basic arithmetic facts. Recommendation 7. Monitor the progress of students receiving supplemental instruction and other students who are at risk. And 8. Include motivational strategies. Recommendation 1 addresses the type of screening materials that should be used in Tier 1. Recommendations 2 through 6 address the content of Tier 2 interventions and the types of instructional strategies that should be used. The final 2 recommendations address other considerations in implementing Tier 2 interventions. Having data on all of your students is important as teachers make decisions about students moving between the different tiers. Therefore, the first recommendation is to screen all students to identify those at risk for potential mathematic difficulties and provide intervention to students identified as at risk. To do so effectively, a district or school may want to consider the following. First, consider having a team that evaluates potential screening measures. This team should select measures that are efficient and reasonably reliable and that demonstrate predictive validity. Screening should occur in the beginning and middle of the year. Second, consider selecting screening measures based on the content they cover with an emphasis on critical instructional objectives for each grade. In grades 4 through 8, consider using screening data in combination with state testing results. And finally, consider using the same screening tool across a district to enable analyzing results across schools. The second recommendation is that instructional materials for students receiving intervention should focus intensely on in-depth treatment of whole numbers in kindergarten through grades 5 and on rational number in grades 4 through 8. In grades K through 5, students will first need to understand that numbers can be used to tell us how many things are in a collection. As they get older, they need to understand the importance of place value. In grades 4 through 8, students will need to understand fractions and decimals as well as whole numbers. This includes understanding what fractions mean and what they stand for. Part of a focus on rational numbers is to be able to solve a variety of story problems using a variety of contexts and different situations using whole numbers, fractions, decimals, and percents. Additionally, it is very important that students receiving Tier 2 instruction understand the reasoning behind the methods of calculation that they're learning. The third recommendation is to provide explicit and systematic instruction during Tier 2 instruction. Systematic instruction involves teachers introducing mathematic concepts gradually and in a logical order and students being given many opportunities to apply new math concepts in a wide variety of contexts. Explicit instruction involves the teacher giving clear explanations of concepts and using step-by-step modeling to show how to solve problems and perform operations. Students should be given opportunities to solve problems in a group and communicate problem-solving strategies. Additionally, incorporating cumulative reviews will provide students with an opportunity to practice topics previously covered in depth to ensure that the knowledge is maintained over time and help students see connections between various mathematical ideas. At all grade levels, students who struggle with solving word problems see each problem as a separate endeavor. They focus on steps to follow rather than the behavior of the operations and tend to rely on trial and error. For these students to be successful in solving word problems, teachers will need to explicitly teach what type of problem is solved by what type of operation. Therefore, the fourth recommendation is that intervention should include instruction on solving word problems that is based on common underlying structures. Students should be explicitly taught about the structure of various problem types, how to categorize problems based on structure, and how to determine appropriate solutions for each problem type. For example, change problems describe a direct or implied action over time in which a quantity is either increased or decreased. For these problems, students determine whether to add or subtract by determining whether the change in the quantity is more or less. Students should also be taught to recognize the common underlying structure between familiar and unfamiliar problems and to transfer known solutions, methods from familiar to unfamiliar problems. For example, students who know how to recognize and solve a change problem type with whole numbers should know that they can apply the same strategy to a structurally similar word problem that looks different because of changes in wording and the presence of additional story elements. A major problem for students who struggle with mathematics is they have a weak understanding of the relationship between the abstract symbols of mathematics and the various visual representations associated with them. Therefore, the fifth recommendation is that intervention materials include opportunities for students to work with visual representations of mathematical ideas to help scaffold learning and eventually lead to understanding the abstract version of the representation. Visual representations can include things such as number lines, strip diagrams, drawings, and other forms of pictorial representations. It should be noted that it is okay to initially use concrete objects as manipulatives in building conceptual understanding, then transition to understanding of visual representations, and finally to the abstract. Quick retrieval of basic arithmetic facts is critical for success in mathematics. However, many students with mathematical difficulties are not fluent with these facts. For this reason, the panel recommended that interventions at all grade levels devote about 10 minutes in each session to building fluent retrieval of basic arithmetic facts. For students in kindergarten through grade 2, it is recommended to explicitly teach these strategies for efficient counting to improve the retrieval of mathematical facts. For students in grades 2 through 8, it is recommended to teach them how to use their knowledge of properties such as commutative, associative, and distributive law to derive facts in their heads. The seventh recommendation is to monitor the progress of students receiving supplemental instruction and other students who are at risk. For students who are in Tier 2 or Tier 3 and borderline Tier 1 students, it is recommended that progress be monitored at least monthly using grade-appropriate general outcome measures. But in general, as a teacher becomes more concerned about a student, they should monitor that progress more frequently. Also, including curriculum-embedded assessments will give teachers information about whether or not students are benefiting or learning from the interventions. These measures can be used as often as every day or as infrequently as once every other week. In addition, considering using progress monitoring data to determine when instructional changes are needed. This includes regrouping students who need continuing instructional support within Tier 2 or Tier 3, or moving students who have met benchmarks out of intervention groups and back to Tier 1. Students in Tier 2 interventions may need extra support to stay motivated. For this reason, the final recommendation is to include motivational strategies such as praising students' effort and engagement in lessons, their completion of mathematical tasks, and the accuracy of their work. It should be noted that praise is most effective when it is connected to specific accomplishments and recognizing students' efforts as well as progress. Some students can be motivated by charting their progress and then setting goals for themselves. The information provided in this tutorial came directly from the IES practice guide titled Assisting Students Struggling with Mathematics, Response to Intervention for Elementary and Middle Schools. This practice guide will give you a more detailed description of the recommendations, as well as suggestions on how to carry out each recommendation and how educators can overcome potential roadblocks to implementing the recommendations. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you found this information helpful and informative.